Minimalists.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I am Ryan Nicodemus, and I'm back, baby! Together we are the Minimalists!
Yes, we are. Today, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of positive thinking with our returning champion, TK Coleman.
I love that.
You're the first person to be on this podcast 4 times. Well, besides me and Ryan.
Right.
Ryan, you've been on here 4 times,
At least,
you?
yeah.
So I'm aiming to be the MJ, Michael Jordan, for our listeners of this podcast.
So I'm going to make that now, right?
Yeah, right.
he's gonna like insert. I'm aiming to be LeBron James. No, so I'm gonna appear 6 times, and then I'm gonna retire from all podcasts.
I think it's a genius idea, man.
Now, do you think you'll foul me before at the end?
I'm gonna push you off for the last answer to the last question.
All right, today we're gonna talk about.
Nobody gets that at all. Just edit all that out.
We're going to talk about positive thinking with TK Coleman. You can check out his podcast. It's called Office Hours. Also, tkcoleman.com is his website. Discover Praxis is his business. Discoverpraxis.com. Our first question is from Shania in Bangor, Maine.
I'm 21, and I find it really hard not to compare myself to people that are 27, 28, or much older in their successes. And I find it really hard to stay in a constant state of motivation as I feel like everyone else is around me. And I feel like my mental health really affects that, even though I try not to let it. So I guess my question for you would be, what are your guys' biggest motivators? And when you're struggling mentally or just in your everyday life, how do you remind yourself of those so that you can always be motivated?
Man, I feel like comparisons are like the biggest demotivators. Like they can be, right?
I think, yeah, maybe both. It depends. I try to compare myself to like the most ideal version of myself. We actually did this backwards. We recorded the Maximal episode before this, and we were talking about like if I'm just comparing myself to Jason Momoa all the time,
That's a problem.
That is going to be
That's going to be very demotivating.
But if I compare myself to the best version of myself, that can be inspiring. Yeah. What about motivation, TK?
I don't know if you need to feel motivated all the time.
Amen.
I don't even know if that's a healthy thing to pursue. So I think I would like to challenge you to release yourself from whatever ideal you have going on in your mind of what a motivated person looks like and feeling the need to always strive towards that. You know, when we talk about the pros and cons of positive thinking, I think one of the cons is it often leads to this belief that feeling unhappy or uninspired or unmotivated is a sin. And it's evidence that something is wrong with me. And I think developing a healthy relationship to the emotional spectrum requires you to accept that there is a broad range of feelings required to be a complete human being. And you may have moments where you don't feel motivated to pursue your goals. Well, guess what? Some of the best dreams come from a space other than feeling motivated to pursue your goals. I mean, as a rudimentary example, think about all the great love songs, all the great art that has come from having your heart broken and being in this space of like, oh man, I can't believe she left me, right? Or being in this space of like, man, I just tried to achieve this thing and it failed and I don't know if I have the strength to go on anymore, and being in that space for a few months. There's so much great art. There's so many great dreams. There's so many great ideas that come from a space that is different from, yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to be a part of the 1% and crush everything. Like, you don't always need to be in that space. It's okay to be a human being. It's okay to feel something other than the inspiration necessary to do great work.
Those are boring stories too, man. I woke up and I started winning, and then I won the next day, and I just kept winning. And now I'm just accepted that I'm a winner. I've just always won.
We were rooting against Golden State this year is because like they had stacked the deck for themselves so much.
Right.
And while you didn't want anyone to get hurt.
Is that one thing that you and TK do agree on? You both are rooting against Golden State?
I don't know what his thoughts were this.
I was conflicted, but
I was rooting for Kawhi because he's this sort of emotionless. You know, he's the new John Stockton, basically.
Kawhi is amazing. I call Toronto Raptors. It's captured on Office Hours. I called it preseason. they're winning the finals.
Really?
I called it, dude.
Nice.
I'm calling Utah Jazz next year.
I saw that tweet. Yeah, I'm going to save that and repost it in the playoffs.
Tell me how well it ages, okay?
But no, yeah. But to your point, though, it's like it's the same reason why like I root against the Patriots in football. It's like, okay, great, you guys won some Super Bowls. Let someone else win a Super Bowl.
Right, they've had, what, 6 with Tom Brady, something like that?
I don't even know, man.
Yeah,
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
But that's the thing. You look at that, and unless you're part of that tribe, you identify with the tribe, you can recognize excellence, and you can appreciate it. It's the reason I really like someone like a Tony Robbins, where you like, that guy seems superhuman, not in the sense that he's not human, but it's like human 2.0 almost, right? Like the next evolution. And you see that athletically with someone like LeBron James. He doesn't just have the athleticism, but he has the athletic IQ. We were talking about that too, how you can't really translate that to like sports biographies or whatever, but he creates a game that isn't just physical, but it's mental, and he's able to sort of bring the two together. You can appreciate that, but also at some point, it may have been the reason that I really liked Utah growing up, because I was like, the Bulls, this Michael Jordan guy is like, he has the cheat code,
right?
And you tend to, unless you're part of the tribe, like because TK's from Chicago, people from the outside, I recognize his excellence, but I'm tired of this. I want the humanity. I want John Stockton to win a title, because he's your everyday guy from Spokane, Washington.
Yeah. The creative process has ebbs and flows.
Right.
It has stages, and a part of what it means to become a great creator is being available to all the different dimensions of self that is presented throughout those different stages. All of life can't be spent at some peak state where you're like, let's go out and get them. Let's go do something. You need moments where you are very sober and you're thinking to yourself, why do I feel so upset about that? You need moments where you're filled with passion because you observe something in the world you don't like and you say, man, that makes me mad. You need moments where you go watch a basketball game or you go attend a concert. You need moments to be a great human being. There's a theater professor at Western Michigan University, Joan Harrington. She said, the key to being a great artist or a great creator is being a great human being. And that means you have to have something else to think about, something else to devote yourself to, something else to immerse yourself in, other than this thing you want to be great at. So I know you may have goals, I know you may have dreams, and I know when you look at the people around you, you want to feel really motivated all the time. But the key to having that motivation is investing in things that will generate self-knowledge. And that means just be a human being, release yourself from that. You don't have to be motivated all the time, but be curious about wherever you are, and let it teach you. Be present to what you're feeling.
So to punctuate what you're saying, TK, like I totally agree.
Because it definitely needs to be punctuated.
Yeah, you cannot be motivated 100% of the time, but that's good news, because like you said, you can give yourself permission to like be okay with not being motivated instead of feeling like it's a sin to not be motivated.
Yeah.
However, I do think there are ways we can kind of get this motivation going, and I think maybe. Like for me, I wrote down a few ways of what I do when I'm feeling like just have no motivation at all. Really, what I kind of look for is inspiration somehow. So I can do that through a book, I can do that through a blog post, I can do it through a podcast episode, I can do that through having meaningful conversation with you guys.
Do you want to talk about the difference between motivation and inspiration?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Go for it.
Well, just to me, real quick, like inspiration comes from the outside, motivation is internal.
Right.
And so if you're having trouble with the internal side of things, quite often it's, where am I going to find the best inspiration? Because you can also get negatively inspired if you what's the saying? You are the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with, right? Yeah. And if the 5 people you surround yourself with are demotivating, they're negative, they're going to inspire you to feel like crap.
Right.
Wait, motivation is the internal one?
Yeah.
And inspiration is external. And I would say that like motivation, I think it has to start with inspiration, doesn't it?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think you can have someone who's close to an enlightened state where they don't require the inspiration outside. In fact, I think there are certain people who are more self-motivated than other people, and some people require more inspiration. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing inherently good about that either.
So maybe a different way to phrase it is maybe inspiration is like not a cheat code, but it is one possible way to get you to be internally motivated. But you're right. Like, motivation doesn't have to come from inspiration, meaning if I got a problem, I'm going to be motivated to solve it. I don't need to hear TK's take on it to solve this problem that I have in front of me.
But you might get motivated by TK if your problem is, I have a flat tire, and you go to TK and because you're like, I've never changed a flat tire, I don't even know what to do. And he's like, oh yeah, I just had a flat tire last week, and here are the three steps I did to solve that problem. You're like, okay, now I realize there's hope on the horizon. I realize there is a recipe, and so that has now inspired me. I feel more motivated because I don't feel the despair of, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to change this tire. I don't even know what to do. What is a tire?
Yeah, yeah. I think when I was thinking about this question, the William Faulkner saying where he said, only write when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes at 9 a.m. every morning. And like, to me, like that's putting in the work.
Yes.
Like that. Like when I think about you, when I think about Colin Wright, when I think about Podcast Sean, like you guys are, I look at you guys like, God, I wish I was that motivated, because you guys are always, I feel like you put in like way more work than what I put into when it comes to reading, when it comes to writing. I mean, I still put the work in, but not as much. And I kind of get caught in thinking like, oh, that's because I lack the motivation. But when I really look at it, it's like Colin Wright, he's right, like on tour, he's riding in the back seat.
It's discipline. It's not motivation
Exactly.
at that point.
Exactly.
Do
But
you delineate the two, TK?
Discipline and motivation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ingredient to motivation to a certain extent, right? Because that quote that Ryan just quoted there was, I think it's spot on. What he's really saying is, I have the discipline to write every morning, even when I'm not motivated.
And when you become disciplined, I think like the motivation actually will start to come. Now, it doesn't mean that like every single morning at 9 a.m. he's inspired. Like he might put in an hour worth of writing and like throw his hands in the air after and be like, that was worthless, and delete, the 2,000 words that he wrote that day.
Well, we were talking about that on Patreon. Like, writing is noticing. Like, ultimately, that is, and so he has to show up and notice every morning at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
And if you're noticing, that will start to motivate you.
Yeah. I really like that. All right, I'll throw one more thing in. So, motivation is also contextual. Sometimes when we say, I'm having a hard time motivating myself, what that really means is there's this thing I think I should be doing. And when I try to force myself to do it, I feel really unmotivated. How can I trick myself into wanting to do this thing that I don't want to do? And I think sometimes a good question to ask yourself in those moments is not, how can I motivate myself to do X, Y, Z, but rather, what am I already motivated to do in this moment, even if it's something other than what I think I ought to be doing? So you see this, for instance, in study. It's a fact that we can only pay attention to something for so long before we need a break, right? So maybe you're listening to a lecture or you're reading a book, and there comes a point where you stop feeling motivated, but you've made the mental judgment that a good thing for me to do right now is to read this entire book or read this entire chapter, but your motivation's gone. Well, you can force yourself to finish, but you can also say, well, what am I motivated to do? Because what I don't like or what I don't feel inspired by is as instructional as what I do like and what I do feel inspired by. And you might find in that moment that you do feel motivated to take a walk and think about what you just read. You do feel motivated to watch a movie. You do feel motivated to call up a friend and discuss the ideas.
It becomes a problem when I am motivated to just do things that pacify me. So writing is an example that Ryan brought up. But let's say like, well, I'm really feeling motivated to watch YouTube videos right now. Watching a YouTube video is not inherently good or bad, but falling down that I tend to be more motivated by, I'm motivated to eat a piece of chocolate cake, as opposed to I'm motivated to do something that's healthy. So one is the path of least resistance. One is the path of pleasure, and I think we mistake pleasure with payoff, and the real payoff doesn't have a lot of pleasure always in the middle. There's drudgery, there is difficulty, there is discipline, there is habit forming. And the real payoff, though, is on the other side of it. The real payoff isn't on the other side of the chocolate cake. Once you've eaten I don't know anyone who says, I'm really happy I ate a piece of chocolate cake last month.
Right. Sure.
I'm really happy I'm eating it right now, maybe.
Right.
But that pleasure is so fleeting. And I think the same is true with, well, if I'm just skipping around from what motivates me to what motivates me, then I'm not actually putting in the work.
So let me touch on that, because I think you're right. And it's important that we make a distinction here. So let's say health, like eating healthy, is the thing I'm not motivated to do. Okay. One alternative to that would be to say, well, what do I feel motivated to do? I feel motivated to eat chocolate cake. Okay, let's do that. All right. We can agree that that's probably not a good idea, that there are some alternatives that are bad. But even then, there are a lot of people that would say, well, you might want to build in a cheat day because that can help. But let's not get into that.
Sure.
What we could say is your lack of motivation is still very instructional. And it might not be the healthiest thing for you to just try to override it with a let me trick my brain technique, because eating healthy is a thing that has a diverse range of possibilities. There's no one way to eat healthy. And if you're not motivated to eat healthy, that could be an indicator that there's some particular approach to eating healthy that you should be unmotivated by. And if you just try to force yourself to surpass that, then you're going to miss out on the opportunity to learn an approach to eating healthy that works for you. Right. So I think whenever you feel unmotivated, you don't just override it, and you don't just choose the easiest thing to do. And that's what you touched on. Don't choose the easiest thing to do. What you touched on is don't just override it. But there's also this middle ground of saying, hey, maybe there is a way of eating healthy that my buddies aren't doing, but that works for me. I experienced this with working out. Most of my friends, their approach to working out, it revolves around this, I want to be the next Dwayne Rock Johnson methodology that I just never have connected with. I'm not trying to be an action star in the movies. I'm not trying to go to the gym and impress people. Like, I need a way of doing it that works for me, right?
And when different measurement too. So for you, the measurement isn't vanity muscles. It is health, right? And so and even that is nebulous, right? It's like, how do I define health? It might be feeling good. Well, what does that even mean, right? And so getting clear on what it means for some people, their idea of health might be, well, I need to have, I can't have a 6-pack, I need to have an 8-pack of abs, right? And so they're defining it that way, and they're really
Shania,
operating.
There's an indicator there, because she did say she's looking at all the other people around her. So it is very likely that her lack of motivation is stemming from this comparison-based ideal of what she ought to feel motivated to do. So I think for her, it might be useful to say, well, what do you feel motivated to do? And let's look at the range of those options, because I'm sure it includes more than just eating chocolate cake. And let's see what opportunities for customization can be found there.
Yeah, Shania, I want to give you a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. It's a memoir, and we were actually talking about this on the Patreon. Like, it's a self-help memoir in a way, though, right?
Yeah.
And so it is sort of a story of positive thinking, but not just positive thinking. Also, the actions that Ryan and I took while thinking positively, because sometimes positive thinking can get in the way. But Podcast Sean, if you could reach out to Shania, give her a copy of the book, either the audiobook. If you like our podcast, you'll like the audiobook, or if you want the book or the ebook, we'll be happy to send those to you as well. Everything That Remains, it's my favorite thing that we've ever written. Ryan, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It is time for our lightning round, where we answer questions from social media.
Indeed, we do. We are at The Minimalists on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. TK Coleman is TK_Coleman on Twitter. You can tweet him there, follow him there, check out all of his pithy answers, and correspond with him. Let's see. Nancy, what is she saying, Ryan?
Nancy wants to know, practicing positive thinking can make it easier to feel uplifted, but negative thinking helps identify potential issues to prepare for. How can I balance the benefits of both? Good question. I seem to have to tread lightly with my veganism as much as anyone's political or religious views.
I thought it was nice that she added that last sentence there, Ryan. Like,
I know, man. Yeah.
It was a broad question until she got into the veganism thing. So my pithy answer is, and by the way, we do these tweetable answers, but as you know, you've been on here a bunch of times. We can just ramble on a little bit, and then Sean will tweeze out something pithy. But my pithy answer is, dogma is the enemy of understanding. And really what I mean by that is, when we pick an ideology and stop questioning it, that's what I mean by dogma. And whether that is a political viewpoint, I will always vote for this, the person with the red tie or the blue tie, or I will always vote for, or veganism it can be the same thing. That's why we did the podcast. We had Rich Roll and Paul Saladino on here, a carnivore and a vegan together, but I don't see either one of them as having a particular dogma. They have a philosophy, but they're also open. And by the way, they both have the heart of a servant, and that was what was important. They just get there via two different paths. I don't see a dogma. And so I think we do have, what did she say, Ryan? Practicing positive thinking can make it easier to feel uplifted, but negative thinking helps identify potential issues to prepare for.
Yeah.
I don't think that's negative thinking. I think that's maybe being realistic.
Yeah, in a way. That's actually what I was thinking about when I first read this question. My pithy answer is it's possible to prepare for the worst while having a half full glass. So it's like, yeah, you can totally have a positive attitude, a positive mental attitude. Shout out to Stan Dukes.
Yeah.
PMA, that was his thing. But yeah, it's like the preparation for the backlash someone's going to, I mean, in her case, I mean, she brings up veganism. If she's just like going on Twitter and yelling out meat is murder, like she's creating division. And she's got to be aware that like, yeah, when I do this, I am going to create division. I am, there's an exclusiveness that's coming along with this. It's very important to consider like how your message is going to be received. But you can do that and still have a positive attitude at the same time.
Maybe if I were to sum that up in a tweet, the best way to proselytize is not to proselytize.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've said before that I think the best way to approach positive and negative thinking is just by transcending that false dichotomy. I mean, you don't need to slap a label on the kind of thinking that you have. What really matters is it building you up or is it tearing you down? Is it making you healthier or making you less healthy? Is it moving you in the direction that you want to go in, or is it moving you in the opposite direction? Is it self-nourishing and self-edifying, or is it self-defeating? And those are the only questions that matter. If a thought is self-defeating, it doesn't matter if you can slap a positive label on it because you're negating who you are. If a thought is building you up, doesn't matter if people slap a negative label on it. It's helping you go where you want to go. So think mostly about the results that matter most to you, what kind of lifestyle you want to create inwardly and outwardly, and adopt the kind of thoughts that move you in that direction. And who cares if people say, oh, you're a negative person or you're a positive person. Are you living in alignment with your ideals?
Yeah, that's what matters most. Because it's like, I mean, I think about like, when you say that, I think about like a video game streamer, okay? I don't watch them, but I know that they exist. And let's say someone who like...
Sean's daughters, he said they watch the streams more than they'll actually play the games now. They like just... It's like their
it's
form
crazy.
of
It's like,
television.
yeah, man, kids these days. But no, like it's like, Minecraft. I know of the game Minecraft. I kind of know what it kind of involves. But like people, that's what they do for a living. They sit there and they play Minecraft. Now I look at that person and I'm like, you're wasting your time. Why aren't you putting your energy into something more... beneficial for society, and like there's all these judgments that I have, like these ostensible judgments that I have. However, like in their world, like all they have to be worried about is, are they living up to their own expectation? It doesn't matter what I think about them. Like if they really enjoy the game Minecraft and like other people are getting value from watching them play Minecraft, then like more power to them. But I mean, I think that's what you're trying to say is like, it doesn't matter what other people think about you. It really matters is what you think about you.
I'm going to give you guys a math problem. I could be getting myself in trouble. Okay.
This is a maths podcast.
I'm going to give you a math problem. I want you to solve this for me.
All right.
5 plus x equals 0. I want you to solve for x. 5 plus
Negative
x
5.
equals 0. Negative 5. Yeah. But that's a negative number.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. He used a negative number. Did you hear him? It solved the equation, right?
Ah.
Right? Yeah. Does it matter? Does it really matter? He solved the equation. That's all that matters. He got the answer that he needed.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's negative or if it's positive. Like, don't get caught up with those labels. Solve the equations that matter to you in your life. It's that simple.
That's tweetable. That's good, man. All right, Chrissy, as someone who was raised in the JW cult. I know you put this in here for me, Millie.
This is a question we got.
Wait. What's JW cult?
Jehovah's Witness cult.
Okay.
So as someone who was raised in the Jehovah's Witness cult, was physically, mentally, and sexually abused, how can I stay positive despite PTSD triggers? It's funny, when I read this question, I looked up the difference between a cult and a religion. And it's funny because like even like the definitions that I found, like you could look at Jehovah's Witnesses or a lot of other Scientology, a lot of other religions as cults, because there are identifying, but you can also look at it as religions. So that's really my my polite way of saying like, I'm not backing her statement of that J-dubs are a cult.
Right. This is her question.
Yeah, this is her question. Okay.
And you can understand why it'd be her question if she was mentally, sexually, physically abused.
Well, in fact, that is why it would be a cult to her, because that is a cultish That's a problem with one of the cults, like basically illegal things happening that are being brushed under the rug.
You and I both know people. I grew up Catholic, and you grew up Jehovah's Witness. We both know people close to us who were molested by the church.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Like because as a Jehovah's Witness, you're not supposed to like read outside of their material. Like they have an organization, they have a governing body of. There's not like a specific number, but there's these gentlemen in place who put out all this information, and that's the only information you're supposed to read. Now, when I started reading facts, it is mind-blowing, like how much stuff like actually does get covered up. It's crazy. Anyway, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Well, my pithy answer is the exact same as it was for the previous one, and this, I think, ultimately leads to understanding. Is dogma is the enemy of understanding, right? And so one thing that she has to do is she now has a very narrow worldview, and understandably, of like, well, all Jehovah's Witnesses are bad. That's creating your own dogma because you're going against another dogma.
Right. There are some very awesome. I see what you're saying. Like there are some very awesome Jehovah's Witnesses out there, but in her experience, there aren't.
Right, because what you're doing is you're creating a label that says other, right?
Yeah.
And man, we were having a really great race conversation a moment ago, and it was sort of about like people identifying this other group and saying, well, you're other, and then I'm different from that. And I think that you're creating, out of one dogma often stems a separate dogma, and we have to be really careful about that. But also we have to understand like how did you get to where you are, right? And an understanding of how you got where you are does help you let go. It helps you forgive. And if I were to give you another pithy answer, I would say letting go is the ultimate superpower. Because in order to let go, you ultimately have to understand how you got here.
Yeah. My pithy answer is this: PTSD can be like a bad car accident. You might need to seek a professional's help to mend the wounds. So, Chrissy, having a positive attitude isn't going to undo all the terrible harm that has happened to you. And especially if you're experiencing a lot of PTSD, like there are professionals out there who help deal with this trauma and to work through that trauma that you have. I think, and we talked about that in the Maximal episode, how, just have a positive attitude, it'll fix you. Like, no, like a positive attitude is not all you need right now, Chrissy. Like you might need to really like talk to someone professionally to help mend these wounds. I mean, and the reason why I liken it to a bad car accident is because, if I was in a car accident and broke my leg, I'm not going to try and set my leg by myself. Like I'm going to go to the hospital and like have my leg fixed. I'm going to have it mended by someone who knows how to do that. And PTSD is, it's just, instead of a physical trauma, it's mental trauma, but it's still trauma.
Yeah. And you'll do what you can for the time being, but then ultimately you're going to go to the professional to help you out with that.
Yeah. That's a real good example too. Cause sometimes when people ask, how can I stay positive in spite of this thing that happened to me? It means like, hey, what are some tips for how I can tough it out and not let this affect me? And then that easily slides into a sense of if I allow myself to be affected by it, that means I'm weak. That means I'm a bad person. That means I'm not fulfilling my moral responsibility. And I just want to say, you have the right to be affected by whatever affects you. If somebody hurt you, you have the right to be honest and say, this hurts. If it happened a long time ago, you have the right to say, and it still hurts. If you know somebody who got over their hurt faster than you, you have the right to hurt as long as it hurts for you. And I would change the frame from how can I stay positive in spite of what happened to me to how can I optimize for the healthiest kind of life that I can live given what I have been through. I'm sorry that happened to you. Your situation is unique to you, and what you have to do is optimize for health. And that means you've got to seek out the relationships, the alliances, and the conversations that are going to help you get what you need. And to follow up on Ryan's suggestion, I would strongly encourage you to find someone that you trust, who's got the professional skill, because coming out of cults and dealing with mental and physical abuse is an area where there are professionals who are trained and equipped with a lot of tools to help people process those experiences. And as a non-professional in that area, I would highly encourage you to at least have an initial conversation with someone who is experienced with helping others who have gone through similar things, so that you can get what you need to be healthy in life.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I will say about having a positive attitude in this situation for Chrissy, I guess I did think of one way that it could help her, is like the hope that we were talking about in the Maximal episode. I mean, it's okay for Chrissy to hang on to some hope that things can get better if she uses, the tools available to get through this trauma that she's been through. So there is hope, Chrissy, and that's maybe the takeaway here when it comes to positive thinking is don't lose hope.
Yeah, or even better, find the hope.
Yeah.
Where is your hope?
Yeah,
because hope says something about your future, and when you have hope, then I feel like you can move forward accordingly. We got a bunch more surprise questions this week. What's the best way to seek critical feedback without sacrificing positive thoughts? What about people who have a hard time being positive? Isn't being positive the same thing as being delusional? Is the self-help industry just a bunch of fluff? When is it okay to wallow in sadness or anger? What's the best solution to racism? What a strange conversation that turned into. And also, I'm going to read a email argument with my doctor. The first line of his email was, "Positive thinking doesn't work." And then we'll go back and forth on that argument there. And if you want to hear all of that, you can listen to this week's Maximal episode, available exclusively on Patreon. That's right, you're currently listening to our weekly Minimal episode, but each week, Ryan and I, and this week TK and I, and Ryan and I, we recorded a entirely different, much longer, long-form Maximal episode on the Minimalists private podcast. It's a place that gives us a space to talk about a lot of things we don't typically talk about in public. Plus, Patreon is the best way for us to fund this podcast and keep it 100% advertisement free. When you subscribe to the Minimalist Private Podcast on Patreon, you'll also receive a personal link so that our Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also get access to our entire back catalog of more than 100 private podcast episodes. Find all the details and all the good stuff, including an additional private podcast episode every week over at theminimalists.com/support. Ryan, what else you got for us this week?
Being informed is more important than ever these days. So I just want to encourage people, like I usually do, to read more and get informed. And now, here are some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners, my favorite part.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I currently live in the Bay Area, and I was calling to comment on your episode 3, which talks about children and what I do with my children that helps. Every first week of December, with clutter, my children go through all of their toys, and we wash them, we clean them, we put them in cute little bags, and then we donate them to centers around our community. And they love acting like Santa and sharing their toys and stuff, and it gives us kind of that pre-Christmas splurge period. Also, we live in an RV full time, and so having that limited a space has definitely helped us with the grandparents and that kind of stuff. They give us more experiences than stuff, since they know we just physically don't have room.
Hello Josh, hello Ryan. My name is Sandra, and I currently live in Zurich, Switzerland. I want to recommend a book that might hopefully bring a lot of inspiration to you and your listeners. In my profession as a designer, I have found myself often challenged with the consumption-oriented mindset of the industry, and although I work in publishing, mostly designing books, I would still find myself often wishing that I could bring more of a positive change into this work with my work, but I never really knew how. Then I found a book called The Little Red Book About How to Make Design Matter by David Carlson, and it inspired me so much that I decided to share it with you. In my opinion, any person, designer or not, can find value in it because it encourages the reader to make their work more meaningful and then guides you with simple, inspiring examples. I really can't express enough how much this book has changed for me, has made a change for me, and how excited I now feel to make all the ideas happen.
All right, y'all. Thanks again today to TK Coleman. TK, if people want to check out more of you, Office Hours Podcast, I think is a great place to go. Where else should they go?
Yeah, go to the Office Hours Podcast. I write a lot of blogs and put a lot of material out there on discoverpraxis.com and also my personal blog, tkcoleman.com. I don't blog every day, but
Sometimes he does though, and it's like
Yeah.
I'm intimidated by him. I'm like, I write every day usually, but I don't publish something every day, and all of a sudden I'm getting stuff in my inbox from. But I will say this to you, TK. You are one of my favorite public thinkers, public intellectuals, whatever you want to call it. But I really appreciate your public ruminations, and I'm really grateful that the world has you, man. You're a good friend, you're a good person, and I'm really grateful.
Thanks for being here, man.
Man, I love you guys, and I appreciate that. Can I get one more plug?
Yeah, for sure.
Dude.
I want to plug an idea and a resource. I wrote a book alongside Isaac Morehouse called Freedom Without Permission. And there's an entire chapter that's going to take you a lot deeper than what I can cover here that I think is very apropos to our discussion on the pros and cons of positive thinking. But I talk about two important concepts that I think are necessary to have a good discussion on this topic. One is emotional versatility. And I talk about that as a viable alternative to happiness, that the goal of life is not to be happy, but it's to be emotionally versatile. And I talk about a concept that I call psychological choreography, which is the ability to find your rhythm in any emotional state, where I compare moods to genres of music. And I liken happiness to those forms of music that we have an easy time dancing to. So as an example, if you've ever gone to a wedding, there's always a song like YMCA or Happy by Pharrell that everybody, including your uncle who can't dance, can have a good time to.
Twist and shout. Personal fave.
Yeah, because there are certain songs that don't punish you for not having a good rhythm. You can jump up and down, you can just move your body any kind of way, and you'll look totally fine. Happiness is like that song. When you're happy, you never pick up the phone and call up a buddy and go, "Hey man, I'm just feeling so good today. What do I do with these emotions?" Like, there's no sense of confusion that comes with happiness, because it's like a song or a genre of music that's really easy to dance to. But let's go back to the wedding, and let's say you're on the dance floor and Happy by Pharrell is playing, and we're all having a good time. But then the music stops, and now polka comes on. Now jazz comes on. This is a genre of music that's a little bit more complex. It's harder to dance to. And so what does everybody do? Everyone kind of removes themselves from the floor, because we don't know what to do when that kind of music is on, because it will punish you for making the wrong move. And these are the forms of music that require a deeper understanding to know what to do, because you can't just go on the dance floor and do anything to polka music. There's a certain way you have to find your rhythm in order to be able to make it work. And those are what like our non-happy emotions are like. That's what jealousy is like. That's what sadness is like. And that's why we pick up the phone and call a buddy when we feel those emotions, and we respond differently than when we have happiness, because we don't know how to find our rhythm in those states. But just like any form of music, you can learn how to dance to it, and it requires a different way of moving your body, a different way of adapting to it, but you can learn. And I talk a little bit about that in that book. But I just want to say to anyone who's listening, I don't think the goal of life is to force yourself to be positive all the time, or to force yourself to feel good all the time. The goal of life is to be fully human. It's to be fully alive. And sometimes that involves recognizing that there's a wide gamut of feelings, and it's about learning how to relate harmoniously to the whole emotional spectrum, and learning how to incorporate that into the creative process that is life itself. So,
Remember the book one more time?
Freedom Without Permission.
All right, let's put a link to that in the show notes podcast, Sean. And if you send us some copies, we'll give some out on air as well.
You got it.
Real quick, for right here, right now, this is where we talk about one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalists. So we made a decision recently that was not an easy decision to make, but sometimes we have to identify what enough is, right? We're always, as human beings, it feels like the human condition is about more. At least if it's not the human condition, it's the consumerist condition. And I need to get more. We don't even know why we're pursuing more sometimes. And so we just think the more is the goal of the thing, right? Yeah. Ryan and I made a difficult decision. We're capping our Patreon audience at 6,000 people. And so you're roughly 2% of our overall listening audience. And the reason we're doing that is because it's a place where we have these sort of private discussions like we just had, right? And we feel unencumbered, and it's a place that we can have difficult discussions. We can have first drafts of discussions in a way. We can let our hair down a bit without fear of judgment or ridicule or these other things, because it's a group of people who who understand us to a certain extent. Now, might not always agree. They might not agree with us, and we accept that, right? But it's a smaller group of people, and what we've realized is this thing has grown significantly. In the last 4 months, our Patreon has doubled in size, and I'm assuming that with that trajectory, we're going to get to that cap relatively soon. When, I don't know, but I want to curate an audience, and we figured out a number that was our minimum viable audience, as Seth Godin might call it, right? And say, hey, that's enough for us. And it makes sense, because growing for the sake of growth that's cancer, right? If you're just growing to grow, why are you growing? And for us, this is a place that allows us to pay Podcast Sean and Jordan and Jess and the studio space and also ourselves and have this podcast 100% advertisement free. But we don't need to grow in perpetuity. And I like having this small space where we can test out new ideas without having to worry about, well, can't believe I just said that.
I thought it was because we came up with an algorithm and figured out that happiness.
6,000 patrons. Is that in your book? So we figured out what enough was for us, and so you're welcome to join us there, patreon.com/theminimalist if you want. Otherwise, you can keep listening to the minimal episodes as well. If you have a question, comment, or minimalism tip for our podcast, leave us a voicemail, 406-219-7839, or send a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. You can comment on this episode at youtube.com/theminimalists. If you want our show notes in your inbox, sign up for our email list over at theminimalists.com, and you'll also receive our Simple Sunday emails each week. And for our added value this week, let's listen to a song from the king of positive music, happy music. This is like dance floor at a wedding music for sure.
I'm like, wait, I have an album out?
Jason Mraz. He every time he's one of these guys that is sort of like relatively one-track music, but does happy music really, really well.
Yeah.
And I didn't know he came out with a new album last year. It's called No, is the name of the album.
Cool.
And I turned it on when I was picking Bex and Elle up from the airport a couple weeks ago, and Elle is just in the back seat dancing. She's singing the words, doesn't even know the words, and she's like singing along with it.
Oh,
and it's like,
that's great. It
does change the way that you feel. All of a sudden, like you can be in this negative sort of mood. You turn on a Jason Mraz song, and all of a sudden you're feeling a bit more positive. So
Christmas does that too. So,
Christmas music, yes,
Yeah.
yes indeed. Here is Have It All from Jason Mraz's latest album, No. And if you leave here today with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
The Minimalists.